Bienvenidos, soy Damián Kirchner, director de Mediamorfosis. Vamos a comenzar un encuentro en el cual Tom Burton, director de BBC Studios de Gran Bretaña, invitó a dos colegas británicas también para tratar de ayudarnos a entender cuál es el negocio de ser creativo, de mantener nuestra creatividad para lograr monetizar nuestros contenidos sin dejar de ser autores y creadores de nuestra propia propiedad intelectual. Para eso, invitamos a Sharon de Raucous Studio de Gran Bretaña y a Eleanor Withley de Marshmallow Laser Fest. Los invito entonces a compartir este panel para ver cómo la creatividad puede ser negocio.
Hello, welcome to Mediamorphosis. We're all very pleased to be here. Thanks for joining us. It's a real pleasure. I'll let Nell and Sharon, my two panelists, introduce themselves. They're both incredibly experienced, but come from organizations that are at different stages of their development, so offer insight and experience across a real spectrum. Nell and MLF have produced some of the most imaginative, groundbreaking and talked about work in immersive. And Sharon is pioneering a blend of theatre and technology, delivering multiple full-length shows to critical acclaim. But enough from me. I'll pass you over to Sharon, first of all, to talk a little bit more about herself and the organisation she works for.
Hi, thanks, Tom. It's lovely to be here with you all. My name is Sharon Clark. I'm a Bristol-based playwright, and I'm creative director of a company called Raucous. We are based at the Pervasive Media Studio in Bristol, and we are ostensibly a theatre company who are incredibly interested in building new tools for storytelling in performance. So we are an immersive company. We like our audience to come into a space with us, to adopt a character with us, and to be sewn into the narrative that we're building. We are playing at the moment with digital technology of all sorts, from robots through to projection mapping. We also are really interested in mixed media and mixed realities, but especially augmented reality and binaural sound. So we have done several shows in the past in found buildings that aren't traditional theatre spaces. And what drives us is basically building an experience for an audience where they can not only be sewn into the story itself, but also be a character in that story that moves that story forward. And we also hold regular sort of workshops and talks around what it means to build new tools for theatre and theatre makers.
Thanks, Sharon. Nell, it'd be great to hear more.
Hi everybody, my name's Nell or Eleanor. I'm based in the north of England, but I am the executive producer of Marshmallow Laser Feast. We're a studio that's based mostly in London, but pretty much around the UK and often working around the world now. We're a studio of about 25 people based in London, as we've said, but we make work which, just like Sharon, explores the use of technology, art, science, and kind of where all of those things come together. We're most interested in using technology in creative work which has a purpose to do so, which allows you to see more, feel more, be more human, or see things that you wouldn't usually be able to do if you weren't using that particular type of technology, or create spaces in different ways. So we're often trying to apply the use of technology in creative work in interesting and kind of hopefully interesting ways for audiences. We've been going in our current form since about 2015, but there's lots of the team have been working together in one way or another for the past 10-15 years, and we work across multiple types of creative work. So we make our own shows, we tour them, we also work with other organizations in collaborations, we work on the web, we work in the live space, and we're kind of constantly trying to push and understand and sort of redefine how those immersive cultural experiences can work and who gets to see them.
Fantastic, thanks both. So as the title of this panel suggests, what we're looking at here is the insight and experience that both Sharon and Eleanor, Nell, bring to the party around a kind of few key areas that we thought were of interest. First of all, how do you go out and find those new opportunities, and what are the principles you you work to when you're doing that? How do you pitch and win them? How do you communicate what you need to say and get it across? How do you look at the creative practice within the organization and adapt that to what's happening around you? And then finally, kind of, I guess it's a slightly dirty word, but creative product. You know, how do you take a look at what you produce and ask yourself the questions about how that helps inform what you do in the future, how it can drive efficiencies and more success. So I'll start with the kind of new opportunities. I think both of you come from a creative and artistic first principles. You know, you're trying to make a commercial world work for the purposes of your creative vision, and those are the people in your business. So I think I'd be really interested to hear really what are the principles that you won't shift on, and how do you communicate and filter based on those principles? What do you say you don't want to do, and how do you say what you don't want to do when it comes to the opportunities that you're looking at? Nell.
I go first. I think just for context as well, for everybody in the audience, we are creative first very much because we were founded by creative people, and I guess that's probably similar to Sharon and Raucous. But we have a triple-headed beast. I sometimes refer to it, it's a bit rude, isn't it? The triple-headed creative direction. So 3 guys who kind of lead and also founded. It was founded by 3 creative people, and 2 of those are still in the team with 1 extra creative director. So just to contextualize, they are both the legal directors along with a couple of the rest of us, but they're also the creative leads of the company. And don't get me wrong, that can cause massive problems and complications, but it's also a real opportunity that we kind of lean into. So that's just important context, I think, for how and why we describe ourselves as creative first. So often the vision of the company it is based, yes, around kind of how we organize ourselves and what we do, but also the fact that those 3 people have always been in the leadership of the company, and therefore we're pursuing the ideas that they have. In terms of how we make decisions about what to do, we base that around 3 kind of key principles, which we didn't make up. They're probably a management consultant somewhere did, but they are that we are always base decisions on: does the project offer us, is it what we're passionate about? Is it going to build our profile, and is it going to create any profit? So the passion, profile, profit are the kind of 3 key areas that we would make a decision around, and a project always has to sign up to at least 2 of those principles. And obviously a creative project or an idea that's coming from within the team is usually going to mean that we're passionate about it. But if someone's offering us an opportunity or a brief to work on something that's maybe not come from within the team, then those principles become even more important, I think.
Interesting. That's really great. Good 3 Ps as well. I remember reading those. Sharon, from your perspective, you know, how do you kind of keep true to what you do while still ultimately making things tick over and winning new work?
I mean, you know, it's a great question because it's actually a really tricky path to tread as a relatively small company. We are a company of freelancers. There are about 15 of us, 32 at our height, 15 when we're in R&D, and I'm the creative director alongside an executive director. But it is really hard to stay true when you're trying to find the mighty dollar to make the things you really are driven to make, the things you're passionate about, as Nell was talking with the 3 Ps. I mean, for us, the one thing we will never compromise on is story. For us, we are a really story-led company. We are driven by the affordances of story for engaging an audience, but also where story can take us and things that we can say with it. So that's what our reputation is built on, is as storymongers. It's a difficult path because in order to tell the stories we want to tell at the scale we want to tell them, with the kit and the experience we want to tell them with, is that then sometimes we also then have to take on briefs and work with more commercial companies where that road has to be navigated. I think when you're talking about what can be negotiated and what won't we give in on and what do we want to hold true, it's always about narrative. It's always about exploring narrative with those companies. But that's for us is it. I mean, and also if somebody wants us to do something and that tech doesn't fit or that idea doesn't fit the ideas of narrative, then we tend to say no to it. So around more sort of experiential work, it's great and it's amazing and people are doing amazing things in that field, but it's probably not for us because that's what we are. And it's probably because we're led by me and I'm a playwright. So it's a very personal approach and it's a very personal decision that we've made. But for me, that's it, is I am interested in how narrative can do all of these things and can influence lots and lots of different forms and mediums. But that's the one for me.
So would you say to some extent it's about staying true and playing to the strengths of yourself? You know, as you're saying, Sharon, you come from a playwright's background. Story is what you understand. So therefore, when it comes to an opportunity, quite understandably, you're looking at it and saying, well, okay, is that something where I can offer some value? Is it something that will fit with that? If it isn't, put it to bed. And then I guess to you, Nell, is that similar for the three sort of creative directors? It's like, does it fit for one of them? Is this something that you feel that will fit for Ursula or Robin or Barney? Either three of those. If it is and it fits, and the shoe fits, that's great, but you wouldn't necessarily, I guess I'm kind of looking at like how you make that judgment call beyond just simply the kind of, okay, does it passion and profit? Great, that's fantastic. But yeah, is it a broader fit, I guess, for the strengths of the business as opposed to anyone else?
Yeah.
Go on now, yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, definitely that's all. I think we make a lot of our decisions by committee, which I think is a really bad idea and bad practice. But in that sense, we're effectively a bunch of producers who like making things happen and directors who like making their ideas come to life, right? And between us, that is, if that's the baseline of the company, then that allows us to have some really great conversations about the opportunities that come onto the table. And we may have. We've got a very broad and diverse like bunch of people there who think about ideas in very different ways. So they may get excited about something that's outside of their, their sort of natural like line of inquiry, or, the thing that they're particularly interested in. They might go, hold on, actually, this is it's a different way of seeing it. Or we might ask questions like, oh, do you think they would be interested in seeing that principle from this point of view rather than the way they framed it? So it's often about opening up a dialogue and having that conversation with whoever's asking us to do something, for sure. But yeah, there's always that. I mean, I as a producer would be like, oh, that feels like more of a Robin project because it's more, whatever narrative or using certain tools, or that's more of a Barney one because it's kind of looking at the natural world in a certain way. Like that, absolutely, I do that, and then we debate it and discuss it together. And sometimes it's completely not like that. The needs of the business and the kind of that profit P, something will land and it'll be like, oh, really? Do we want to do this? And then you go, well, actually, we kind of have to. No, we have to, but there's not a really good reason to say no. And if it doesn't tick their boxes as creative directors, despite being creative first, we will try really hard to make that a project that we really want to do creatively. But I have to say, it doesn't always fit, and that we do stuff sometimes that we don't particularly want to, but we'll try absolutely to pivot it to be of more interest to the studio. Yeah,
that's interesting. I think you were sort of mentioning, for me there, I picked up on two things, that in some ways the pinch point is also where you have your flexibility. So yeah, decisions by committee might be something that everybody sort of slightly sort of shrinks back from, but ultimately it's also where you're able to have a conversation and probably deal with the variety of opportunities that you as a company working in an immersive industry have to look at on a daily basis. It could be coming in from an advertising agency one minute, a theatre producer the next. I mean, Sharon, I know you've worked across a kind of a huge wide range from the theatre productions that you've done, of course, but also then fellowships when it comes to the RSC and Magic Leap, etc. Do you think that actually some of those things that maybe traditional companies see as kind of being an issue for yourselves are actually more the bits that give you the flexibility to find the opportunities and win them.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a kind of like, I mean, obviously, Tom, Raucous, when we first met, and we had an idea together where we were exploring some boundaries around performance and technology, and then I set up Raucous. So I'm always going to look at things through the lens and the gaze of the playwright, because that's what I am, and that's what I've been doing since Noah was a boy, really. So it's always going to be from that, but it's something like Nell was saying, talking about like creative integrity, is there are times where that has to be stretched a little. I mean, and I think it's also something Nell said about pivoting as well, is being able to be flexible enough and having people around you who are curious enough and also brave and bold enough to go, actually, we could pivot this. If we talk to the client, we could slightly pivot it and just give them an extra little something. And most of the time when we do that, when we put our sort of raucous spin on things, the client is really grateful, because sometimes we go to a place, we go to a space that they wouldn't have thought of. So we'll go, well, actually, it's great that this new Nike trainer, I haven't worked for Nike, by the way, I don't want to get sued by them, but this new trainer's come out, and it looks great and it runs fast. But what about if we put a story layer on top of that? And so therefore that experience is slightly longer and engages slightly more. So, I mean, we're never sort of backwards and coming forwards. We always will sort of go, well, why don't we look at it this way? Now, sometimes that's a no, and that's fine. That's absolutely fine. But at the end of the day, is taking that idea back to the team, who are going to have to deliver it. Don't forget, this team are going to have to build this and deliver it. And therefore, they must believe in it in some way. They must find some sense of ownership of it and be excited by it, at least in some way. And then, it is. But very like Nell's organization it is a little bit by committee. I never do these things on my own. I never have an idea on my own. We are a united brain around this. And there are other people I rely on incredibly heavily to tell me when I'm out of order, or when I am onto something, or when there is something we can do about it. So I think it's always kind of spin and pivot is a lot of what you have to do as a creative, and kind of find that flex within your business to be able to answer what other people are asking you to deliver.
Yeah, and that's where there's value, right? Like we bring value because we help pivot or bring that richness of thinking about the idea to the table. And I think it's a good challenge to have, but it's to try and prove the value in us going, okay, we're going to spend some time and energy thinking about the thing that you want to do, or the brand you want to launch, or whatever it, if it's commercial, then yes, or if it's a commercial, sorry, then you might think like that. But if it's a different type of production, then we're constantly trying to say, actually, us bringing that diversity of thought, or that kind of, group brain like to the table is really valuable for you and your organization. So
I think that's really...
pay us to
yeah, completely. That's as well. I mean, I think it's interesting, isn't it? I mean, I think particularly within the industry that we all work in, it's at such a cutting edge in terms of the kind of content we produce and the journey that we're going on with audiences and their understanding of it, that we have to work in such a multidisciplined way that actually I think that maybe comes more naturally to us than it does to other traditional industries. So as you say, actually seeing it as a strength is a great point. But underlying that, I still pick up from both of you, you have confidence in what you're good at. So as a consequence, you can have confidence in being able to flex, share the idea with other people. And I think that stems from that kind of clear-headedness around, this is what we're good at, this is what we do. If we can make this work based around that, we can, and we'll try our damnedest to do it. Especially, as you quite rightly point out, if there is a node of zeros on a sheet, we all know we've got to kind of do our best to go and get them. Which brings me on to the next point I wanted to go on to, which is, I guess, pitching or kind of how you, I guess I wanted to hear from both of you. What are the key things you think you need to communicate, and how, and kind of what are the key things you need to communicate and how to the people that you're trying to pitch this idea across to, and then secondly, I guess, where do you draw the line on the scope of work that takes? As you and I, as we all know, again, we work in an industry where it's really hard to explain the idea. You know, you need images, etc. There's a lot of work in that. Sorry. So to clarify that last point, I guess I go wanting to know, what are the key things you think you need to communicate and how? And ultimately, where do you draw the line and start saying to someone, do you know what? We're starting to move into a world where this is the paid part of the work that we should be doing versus the kind of upfront sell that we're trying to do to you to help you understand why we're the best people for the job, but also most importantly, of course, why we've got a great idea for you and it really answers the challenges that you've posed. Sharon.
Yeah, I mean, I think as a company that I've been, you know, historically sort of seated very comfortably in theatre for about 10 years, and now we're starting to poke our head out of our shell and look more commercially, and starting to be approached also by commercial business for some of the thinking we do around audiences and where they consume experiences, for want of a better word. That's horrible, 2 words. I'm so sorry about that, but it just came into my head. Is that this notion of pitching for me is an odd baby to carry, really, because we were, for example, approached by quite a big company not long ago who phoned me up and were like, we really would like a chat. Can you come in Monday for a chat? I thought, that's a chat. So I did prepare like a chat. I prepared, like, you know, and this is what I wanted to say is, but I wasn't really sure why they wanted to talk to me. And as I walked into the Zoom room, 4 men are sat there and they went, okay, you can start your pitch now. And I was like, okay, I've come for a chat because I think you know, so there is a little bit of a sort of cultural shift between me and how I explain or talk about or think about what we do and how we make it, and the process and the outputs and all those things. And then this very commercial pitch and a very sort of rigid way of looking at, the other day I was asked to sort of go for some money, and they were like, for every £1 we give you, we'd like you to bring in at least 3 audience members. And I was a bit like, oh my God, each audience member has a price on their head, and now I have to hit that. So I sort of did a pitching workshop not long ago and was astonished at the rigidity of it, how rigid this pitch idea was about the money, especially side of it. So we tend to go in a little bit sort of like, well, you know, let's just show you some amazing ideas, or let's just give you some amazing music. And I'm kind of trying single-handedly to revolutionize the pitch industry, which is probably not the cleverest thing to do. But it feels like you're trying to put a square peg in a round hole here. And you're coming to me for ideas, or you're coming to us to reinvent or find a new place to make stuff, or to reach a new audience, or to give them an experience that maybe your organization isn't geared up to do. Therefore, us having to go into this line can be quite painful for all concerned. So when we're in those situations, I back off. I back off quite fast, because I figure that this is an indication of the way the relationship is going to go. When 4 men are stood there going, right, pitch. That was it. That's all I got. I was like, this probably isn't for us, because I don't know if that's answered your question. I'm so sorry. I seem to have gone
No, it's really useful, especially having those kind of first-hand examples. I think you said something very interesting to me the other day, which I thought tallied back to the fact you work in performance, which is, you said, okay, first of all, yeah, I've got to put a piece of paper together or something that you can read, that I describe, roughly speaking, the idea, and possibly get some pictures down on removal. But primarily, you know, you were saying my pitching is about getting the idea across. But then you said to me, it's like, but the most important bit is me talking. Yeah. It's like, it's the face-to-face part of it, actually. So I guess to go to that, things, the key things you need to communicate and how. I think I found it interesting. Your point was, don't worry too much about what's on the piece of paper. Just get yourself in front of the person in the first place and do the job there.
Yeah, I mean, PowerPoint or Canva or whatever you use can do so much. But at the end of the day, they're going to want to buy you. They're going to want to buy part of you and your brain and your thinking. And in some ways, I go into performative mode. I go into this kind of performance. But I don't mean jazz hands and tap shoes, please. You know, I mean like, you know, look at me, trust me, this is me. And so I understand that in some ways, my my business is a personality-led business, which is people are going, I'm going to invest in her. And listening to the other side, sometimes I have heard that from other people. I'm going to invest in him. I'm going to invest in her, because they're the beacon in that thing. They're the ones that are. So, you know, sometimes sticking to a script and to this very weighty PowerPoint with lots of figures on it, and that I'm going, we're in this creative business to help commerciality think in a more creative way, maybe. So use that when you go in the room. Be different, and don't be afraid to be different. If they don't like that, then they're not for you. You know,
they were never going to like what you had to offer, though, right? You know,
yeah.
I think what you were saying before, it wasn't. And I think it links back to the point we were saying about creative led and whether or not it's a good fit, because you often it's the play between, like, if you get a brief in or you've got an idea and it's not really going to work for one of the creative directors, or you put the wrong one on it, or that, you know, it's that then it just something doesn't gel and doesn't flow. And there's something about getting the right person in front of the right client, for want of a better word, or right partner, and then it does kind of, it can really grease the wheels. And, you know, certain projects I'm sure that we've done wouldn't have worked if it had been another set of individuals from the company that were trying to do it, or wouldn't have worked in the same way.
It's people. They're investing in people. That's what it's all about. People and their ideas, and people and their outlook on life and their outlook on creativity. That's what they're buying. They're buying a bit of you too. So, and especially at this coalface of a sort of transdisciplinary, whatever you want to call it, but this clash of where everything's coming in from, whether it's performance and augmented reality and storytelling and experience and live art, and all of these things are coming together. Then the way you're holding that in your head is your own personal worth.
Yeah, I think for us, we pitch in different ways to different people as well. So we, you know, MLF have done a lot of branded work in the past. You know, we're very open about that. We still do. We do museum work now as well, which is relatively new for us, but kind of an increasing part of our business. We do, and then we create our own works, and we take them. We fund them or get them funded through various means, and then want to tour them. And so there's so many different types of people that we're trying to effectively sell into all of the time. Sometimes someone's giving us a brief and they want us to pitch or whatever to say whether or not we're the right person for them to choose to give a load of money to make something happen. And that's kind of the dynamic that you've just eloquently described, Sharon. I think we do a lot of those similar things. It's personality driven. It's about kind of getting them into your world, your way of thinking. But when it's our baby or our idea and our project, and we're trying to get someone to invest in it, you suddenly like, oh God, you feel a lot more vulnerable sometimes in those situations. And the pitch or the sell becomes different, and it becomes about, can you believe our idea and the value of it, and that it will drive audiences to you? There's not this kind of like, look, here's our great portfolio, this is how amazing we are. You want us to deliver the thing for you. That there's kind of like, we've got a real confidence around that. But I think with some of the other stuff we do, we've had to relearn a vocabulary or a vernacular around how to get people to believe in our ideas in different ways. And that's been a really interesting process over the last 5 years or 3 years, I'd say, in terms of really understanding how to do that.
It's interesting. I mean, it's going to sound almost like a glib summary, but I think both of you have given it a lot more depth. But there are kind of two things I'm pulling out of that. One, which is, you touched on it at the end, which is communicate the value that you're bringing. It's like, you know, somebody ultimately at the end of the day, yeah, they probably do want 3 people a pound ahead. Whether that's realistic or not is is a point of conversation, but it's understandable. And then, but actually the thing that Sharon, you kind of kicked the whole conversation off with, or the answer to the question was, also think about how you're communicating who you are through the pitch that you're producing, because ultimately that's probably the most important thing they're buying into. Anyone can probably make the budgets work or come up with a pithy phrase that, as you're saying now, you sometimes have to adapt the lexicon for, depending upon whether you're talking to someone from an ad agency or whether you're talking to somebody from a theatre. The bit that marks you out and will ultimately be the bit that kind of probably has someone shaking your hand and enjoy and looking forward to working with you is you, or the team you have behind you, and how you communicate that. I think that's a really valuable bit of insight. So the next thing, and I guess that, talking about the team and the people that make this all happen, because it's never a one-man show, as we've spoken about quite a few times already. how do you handle the diversity of skills and disciplines? I guess not just in terms of a project by project basis, but also in terms of kind of building those skills up over time within the business. So maybe there are skills that you use on 1 or 2 projects, they start to become a bit trending, you then get more and more. And also, I guess, how do you kind of make them successfully work within the team and on projects together? What are your thoughts? Sharon, I know you've done quite a lot of work around this in the past.
I mean, we call ourselves a collective because we sort of we have like a sort of small army of freelancers of all different disciplines who work with us, and we try to remain very fluid and flexible about who we work with, considering whatever project we're on, obviously. So there's a collective of kind of revolving and evolving artists and scientists and technologists. I think if you remember when we first met, Tom, that I had never worked in the field of tech before. And in fact, I often say to people, you know, I don't know how AR works. I think it is just magic. It is magic, isn't it? And I don't know how AI works. Sometimes I don't really not sure quite what AI is, but I know somebody who does. And I have this amazing team around me where we build together a vision or an idea or a story that we want to sort of follow or evolve in some way. And through that, then after 10 years of kind of working with different artists and technologists, is we've kind of started to develop this, our kind of own language, really, our own lexicon of how we can communicate ideas together. So that, I mean, you know, so the technologists will realize if they stand and try and explain to me the inner workings of whatever it is I've asked them to do, it's just not going to work. And if I talk to them about the dramaturgy of the thing I'm trying to do, is what we're always talking about. It's what we always come back to as audience. What we always come back to is how people are feeling in this moment, and how we are going to help heighten that experience for an audience. It has taken me 10 years to find the sort of perfect collective around me now of people who get you. I mean, at the end of the day, people who are as curious about the same things you are, or just really excited about trying to find that thing out. Not all people understand what theatre is and how it works, and a lot of theatre people don't understand technology. So sometimes the lines are drawn. Let's be honest, there are challenges in that. There are an awful lot of challenges in that, especially perhaps from theatre people who come from quite big venues, who perhaps aren't quite used to working in a chaotic way where we're making process up as we go along. We are literally, and I know MLF too, you know, we are sort of pushing process as hard as we can and as far as we can, and seeing where the pinch point is and everything. And that takes a special collaborator to go on that journey with you, because it carries awful risk. It carries risk to them as an artist or a scientist, that things may go horribly wrong, they may spin out of control. And somehow as an organization, you have to hold that fear and that risk for them and say, you know, the amount of times, and I'm sure Nell must find this, is the amount of times you get things wrong. There's no wrong in this world, is it? Let's be honest. But maybe it doesn't work out the way you want it to, is actually the gold mine, because that's where you do your greatest learning. And sometimes in a collaboration, it's very hard to reassure people that that is actually a really valuable thing that's just happened, because of course they just want to make it work. So collaboration it's not so much about the best skilled person. It's often about the person who is as curious as you are about the idea, or is really, really up for figuring it all out alongside you. And it's not dictatorial or telling you how to do it, but just asking a lot of questions. I'm a dramaturg in my other life as well. I dramaturg other people's work, and dramaturgy is around asking questions constantly. And the collaborators I love and the collaborative networks I really enjoy are where we have the questions, but we don't always have the answers quite rightly. It's a creative process.
That's really interesting. So first of all, look to somebody's level of curiosity and synergy with yourself. Second of all, actually dedicate time within the project to collaboration. So I don't make it something that you think will happen by osmosis. Actually make it a formal part of what you do as part of the project, and have a process for following that develops a shared common language between you, so that actually you can communicate. As you say, you each share a kind of mutual understanding of what the idea is, even if you don't necessarily share a mutual understanding of how one another actually got the skills to do it. Now, how does that work? How does that work for you? I mean, again, even within the directors of the business, you've got a variety of skills and disciplines, but equally, I know for a fact you're often working with a huge range of both practical engineering disciplines, but then all equally kind of art directors, etc., etc.
All kinds of skills, some which are really traditional skills bases, and some which are new that we don't really have the job titles for yet. And I think that's is telling, isn't it? And I think it's I totally agree with what Sharon's saying about it's about the right kind of person. We're often sort of going, all the best engineers are in those games companies building these AAA games, and we can't attract them because we don't have the big enough budgets. And it's like, but also maybe they're not the kind of people who would ever really work with us, because they're not gonna necessarily really thrive in the atmosphere or thrive in the industry that we're working in. There's so much to say on the skills stuff. There's the idea that we have to find new vocabularies being able to work together. Like as a producer working in film or television or games, you have to have a certain vocabulary, and we're working out what that is. What is the role of a producer who's working with engineers on or graphics programmers on very software based pipelines, but at the same time has to the next day turn around and talk to a load of people who are going to run a set and be able to shoot motion capture or do an install so something can run in a cemetery for the next 2 months, which is what our team have just gone and set up in Coventry. And you think, that's not your run-of-the-mill set of skills to be able to do all of those things super quick and turn it all around and keep on top of everything. And sometimes we think, I think we've learned a lot over the past few years and continuously learn about, hold on, there's so many places in the world, in so many industries that do this bit much better than we do. So let's just mimic what they're doing. Let's take the tool that they use, let's bring someone in with those skills. And then you fit them into a kind of, it's a bit of an overused word, but a kind of ecosystem of different skills within the company, and you lean on different things. So we've got producers who are great at content development. We've got producers who are much more technical. We've got producers who are maybe much more about the public realm and, and have got softer skills maybe, or whatever, or a mix of those things. Likewise, we've got engineers who are, one of our back-end engineers who's amazing, and he was a Michelin-starred chef, or he was a chef in a Michelin-starred restaurant. And you think he's coming at this from a really creative place, but he's an engineer, but he's just got a whole other set of skills and sensibilities which are fascinating in terms of a person who's interested in multisensory and technology and creative experiences. So I think it's about getting the tone of recruitment right, whether that's on a freelance basis or on a permanent basis. It's about having that diversity of thinking in your team, or diversity of background. It's about not trying to reinvent every wheel and go, just because it's new or using new technology, therefore everything about this has to be new. Like, that's easy. Like, no, just use what already exists. Use the tools that other people that exist. And I think holding the space, as Sharon's saying, is something we've really failed at and had to get better at, which is, and we started kind of trying to describe it as like the cost of collaboration. It's like, what is the cost of the cost of innovation and the cost of collaboration? I think they're two things that we don't really talk about, but they're really expensive, really, for the company to using technology, or in immersive, if we call it our sector that. It's expensive anyway, because we're trying to merge like software pipelines with hardware, with like newfangled things, with set design or whatever we're doing. It's usually involving some form of new, which has some kind of expense attached to it. It doesn't always have to be like that, but that's often the case. If you add into the mix, you're also trying to collaborate with a load of people you've never worked with before, or you're doing something new together. for me, that takes longer, or if it doesn't, you put the team under more pressure in order to deliver something on the same time frame, but with less resources or time to do it in. And then if you're also throwing in, like, you know, with a lot of the branded work we do, they want something that's never been done before. So you're genuine innovation or trying to innovate with an experience or something. You also, there's a cost, a time or a pressure cost to that as well. So if you're not dealing with like 6 zeros on the end of your budget and loads of time, you're going to have to find that resource somewhere. And either it's goodwill of people, either you just want more research time, prototyping time, or you want more hardware, or you want the right skills or the experience of people to come in who've done those things before. So it's really complex, and I'm kind of rambling on, but I sort of think I wish sometimes on a budget I could go, right, that's how much it's going to cost, and that's how long we've got. Oh, and by the way, we're going to add 20% for collaboration because of these things in you. We're going to add another 20% because we're going to need that contingency time because of the innovation that we're bringing to it as well. But obviously, that's a world that I don't think really exists.
I think there's two things that come out and that really chimed with me. I think number one, that, and I say this around creative practice in general, to be honest, which is, for goodness sake, look to what's come before you and have the imagination to look outside of your own sphere of influence for the answers. I think Sharon and I have done that. I remember having a long conversation about how we were going to do this thing, where we wanted such and such to appear, but we didn't want people to look at it straight away. And then we were going to move it from one thing to the other. And then we both just went, I think that's what magicians do, isn't it? And we were like, why don't we just go talk to a magician? So it's, you know, I agree with you entirely. I think more often than not, whenever I go into an organization or a team where they're struggling, the answer is normally sitting sort of 2 steps over there, and it's just looking over. I guess the other part that also chimes with me, which isn't necessarily a tip for everybody out there, but I think helps us recognize it. I'll pose the question to you. I think that uncertainty, which, let's be honest, is apparent in any creative profession, whether you're a carpenter or whatever it might be, there's always some element of uncertainty. But I think for the people that I know, who certainly are the ones that run the businesses in this sector, they kind of thrive in it. They might grumble quite a bit about it, but it's actually the bit they like. It's the bit that makes them get up in the morning, whether it's the kind of, how am I going to get this team of kind of completely diverse individuals from different backgrounds to work, or how am I going to get this piece of technology to do a thing that actually it was never really designed to do, but we think we probably can. I don't know if you both agree with that. I'm not saying that's necessarily the character of everybody in a business, but I certainly think a lot of the people who lead those businesses seem to have that in them, I think.
Yeah, I think there's something about, you know, unpicking knots, you know, that is really key to what you're talking about. Is, you're right, it is. I just had a creative meeting this morning with some colleagues, collaborators in Canada, and them going, you know, how do we tie these 2 shows together, one in Toronto, one in Bristol, London, how, you know, and sitting there and going, well, we could do this, or we could do this. And it's that dream time, that kind of really, really expansive dream time where you feel quite safe to say something maybe even quite stupid or silly sounding to somebody else. You know, one of them just said, oh, well, we could set the whole show on the whale's back, you know, and nobody went, we all went, you know, it's so it is having collaborators around you where sometimes you can just say whatever you want, no matter how daft you may think that is. I think is really, really important.
Yeah, it's uncertainty that I think people thrive off, but it's also this, like, something about the intensity of production when something really comes together that some people really thrive off. We had an interesting conversation at the end of a project recently with some of our team who'd been through the mill, you know, like really trying to do something that they genuinely no one had done before, at least in our sort of circle and with our collaborators, and tried something different, and it was really difficult. And they just said, I think we're addicted to this feeling of like how it feels to have worked, to have got there. And you know, those people aren't people who every time it always goes right. You know, they've fallen off the edge of the cliff and it's gone horribly wrong, but they just absolutely thrive in. I don't think I even got the word for it. There's something about the intensity of production and that when it all comes together, they get such a kick from that.
Yeah.
Maybe we're adrenaline junkies.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what it is.
I don't know. I often thought about this, and we're the three of us are probably disappearing off down memory lane a little bit, or I'm certainly going to do it. But I agree with you entirely now. There's that kind of thrill of the challenge in front of you. Then midway through, you start to get that little glimmer of like, hang on, I think you might crack this. And then there's that moment, almost, as we've all probably done, standing on the edge of a party, looking at all your friends on the inside and going, it all came together wonderfully. And there's a real, I think, a narrative to a creative idea that tends to go through. And yeah, I agree with you. It's very addictive. Even if at the beginning you're going, what am I doing? Not again. Talking of what am I doing and what are we doing, and kind of getting to the end point, I guess, and overcoming those challenges. I'd be interested to hear from you guys, what does good look like for you with a finished project? Not just in terms of kind of audience figures. I mean, clearly meeting the challenge and answering somebody's brief is an important part of that, but also kind of, I don't know, what works for the sustainability of the business? Is it that, that piece of creative, that product that you created gives you a means to do something better, quicker, faster, or perhaps it's the inspiration for the next piece because that's the way you planned it. I'm kind of trying to think strategically, how do you look at what you produce? And as a consequence, what does good look like when you tick the boxes?
That's a really good question, isn't it? I think depending on our organisation, who you ask might get a slightly different answer. So I'll give you my version.
Go on then.
Well, no, I think good is what audiences think is good. I think that's really important to say that that I don't think anything would truly work if we got a load of really rubbish feedback. I think it's very difficult for us to go, okay, audiences hated it, but it gave us X, Y, Z. I mean, there's always lessons from that and learnings and things like that. But good and success really looks like a load of people really enjoying it and getting something from it and taking something about you and the kind of work you create as an organization from that, and ultimately building your audience, I think, is, unless you're massive already. But for us, building our audience is really important. Obviously, it not costing us loads, either in like blood, sweat, tears, or money, is another success point. So we started doing kind of retrospectives of our projects now and kind of digesting a bit, like, how did that actually go? What did we learn? What can we take forward to the next project? How do we disseminate those learnings out for a wider group of people that we work with? And I think often if we've gone, hey, we finished it and we're all still friends and we had a really great time, and and we're not all skint, then that's a really good thing as well. And they're really practical and sort of almost things you can forget. But if the whole team's totally frazzled at the end, doesn't really like each other for a while, and that's not, we've learned, like, that's not a very good thing. That's not sustainable for the human in who we and how we want to work. And then I think, if it's built profile, it's the passion profile, profit thing, the kind of other side of it. But if it's helped you learn about a technique that you want to use again, if it's helped you understand that there are quicker ways to do something, there's a load of like efficiency-based learnings or like technical know-how, or that it's got an idea deeper. Maybe we've worked with a certain type of other collaborator for the first time and it's unlocked a whole idea that we'd want to do that loads more. There's loads of those kind of those pros and assets. But we're often working on the next project will come in and it'll be completely different, and you go, okay, well, what are the kind of oversight things that what are the things that we can generally take forward from project to project? And it's often, has it been delivered with a degree of sustainability, and has it ultimately grown our audience and given people something really?
I think the key thing I could particularly come out of that is kind of looking backwards to look forwards. I think retrospectives on projects are often brushed under the carpet. They're like, oh, we just got to get on and move on to the next thing. And actually, I think they are the entire sort of knowledge engine of a company. If you don't do them, all of that knowledge starts to disappear and ebb for every week that you go past without sitting down around the table and re-looking at what you did. And ultimately, that means you can't have a strategic plan because you're not looking at you're not learning from what you've done previously and where you can make smart decisions moving forwards. Sharon, with the work you do, I think I'd be really curious to see. Same question to you, clearly, but I think your work is so pick up and put down, in the sense that you literally, from a theatre production point of view, sorry, I'm kind of preaching to Sharon here. I'm explaining her own job to her, but for everyone else there, in layman's terms, Sharon has to spin up essentially an entire company. I'm talking, as she said at the beginning, 36 people, hundreds of thousands of pounds worth of stuff. They've got to eat, they've got to be fed, they've got to work, they've got to do all of these things, and then at the end of the run, they will disappear. I'm really curious as to like how does that work for you in that situation?
It's exhausting, you know, to be frankly honest. It's exhausting. So if we can get anywhere near a vision that we first had, that's incredibly satisfying for us, but also for an audience. So we do a lot of retrospective thinking, because if we don't recognize the problems or the issues we had, then we're doomed to repeat them. So we started coming up with this sort of matrix that we've done, that I found the other day, and I forgot we'd done it, where we sort of looked at our shows and we looked at all the things that went sort of right, for want of a better word, i.e. that we found satisfying from an audience point of view and an artist point of view, and then everything that didn't go as well as we would have liked, and the whys. And then looking at them side by side is realizing that the ones that we found the most satisfying, the ones for us that had the most impact with an audience and with us, were the ones where there was the sort of scalability, the scale of it was about the same. There were slightly more right things that went wrong with it than wrong. And that may sound like, well, of course that's the case, but it wasn't always. And it was a show that we thought initially, this has gone really badly. It's really gone badly. And then about 3 months later, when we look back at it, and then when audiences just started very quietly to go, actually, I did prefer that one for these reasons. Sometimes you don't always know when you've got something right or when it's as good as you think it is, because whatever it is you want, an audience may want something completely different, or will see it through different eyes, because half the time you've been working on this for 4 years and you are now exhausted and tired and a bit fed up with it, and it's not gone as well as you kind of thought it would. But an audience will always surprise you and come back with something that you never saw, because you're not looking at it from their point of view all the time. So for me, the audience reaction to the work that can be fed back to us for 6 months, 6 years after is the biggest indicator for me that we are as a group onto a road that is interesting for people, that has impact on people, and maybe even has some kind of influence on a sector too, on the theatre sector. The amount of times I get asked to do talks or conferences around talking about this stuff is also an indication that somehow, okay, we don't get everything right, but our thinking is interesting around this work, or maybe we are pushing a little bit harder at things, and you're going to get stuff wrong, and not what everybody's going to want to go on that journey with you or think it's worthwhile. And it's just trying to keep the faith in yourself, I think. So for me, the audience is my total arbitrator of what it is I do. And so if we're talking about when do I think I've got it right, or when do I think that it's good, is when there is visible movement within that audience, that we have moved them in some way to whatever that is. Sorry, that's a bit convoluted. I went a bit round the houses on that. I do apologise.
That's good.
How many people did you make cry? That's sometimes
you know, sometimes just watching somebody in one show we couldn't get the audience out. The end of the show had happened. You know, we wanted to go home. We couldn't get them out the space, and because there'd been a moment that they'd found really moving, and that was extraordinary. Because then you've got to go, I got that right. You know, they don't want to leave the space. They're not ready yet to come out of the world I've built or we've built to put them back in the other world. So, you know, those small moments, the small wins. Oh, yeah, the money, by the way. The money would be nice. Thank you very much. My God, what we can make on £2.50 is nobody's business. Yeah. So, you know, but at the end of the day, that's what that is as somebody who is creative like Nell's company. That's what it's got to be.
I think that's for anybody doing something creative. And again, whether it's a carpenter or someone making a piece of VR, I think really, if you keep asking the question why, it all boils down to the fact that we're humans and we quite like to see an emotional reaction and some empathy from the audience at the other end. So yeah, I think that's a really, really great point. Yeah, I always say if I see someone laugh, cry, or even just get angry and tell me that the thing's a pile of rubbish, at least I've got something out of you, and that is what that was ultimately was the whole reason for me doing this. Otherwise, what was I doing it for in the first place? Because the money might be fantastic, but ultimately that's the one bit we always flex on. Let's be honest, as creatives, we're always going, okay, we'll make it work as long as we've got that passion profile and profit. That's, I think, a great place to leave it with the audience, because ultimately that's where this all stems from, and it's where it all ends up. Thank you so much, both of you, for doing that. I was going to try and do a summary of all the things that came out of your heads. I'm not even going to try, because that would just, there was so much coming out of that. I'm hoping this has been useful for all of you. I hope there are some takeaways that you can have and take back to what you do and how you work. And do you know what? If you already know it all, perhaps it's something that just gives you a bit more confidence that, again, there are two organizations, two producers, two creatives out there who are going through the same things you are, tackling the same problems you are. So you know what? We're all in this, and that's just the nature of the job. So enjoy it, embrace it, and get on with it. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Tom. Thanks, Nell.